Good morning to everyone. You have studied the methodological approaches to research in accounting. Actually, there are two methodological approaches to research, which is the quantitative approach, which is also known as the deductive approach, and the qualitative approach, which is also known as the inductive approach to research. Anil sir, Daya sir, Chatrika miss, Dilipa miss, and myself, we have been lecturing to you about the qualitative approach to research. However, you must know the distinctions between the two approaches, and therefore in my discussion, I will not only focus on the qualitative approach to research, but I will speak some aspects relevant to the quantitative approach to research as well, for you to understand the distinctions. The overview of my presentation would be determining what research is, understanding why a manager should study about research. The thing is, you have been studying about research under research methodology in accounting, and you will wonder, you will ponder about, you would be in a dilemma as to why you study about research. You would be managers in the future in business organizations, leading many people. Therefore, as managers, it would be very useful for you to study about research. At that time, you will understand the value of studying about research. But why it would be important for a manager, I will just discuss with you. Identifying the available methodological approaches to research in accounting. I said that there are two methodological approaches, the quantitative approach and the qualitative approach. Distinguishing the research processes in the deductive and the inductive approaches. As I told you before, the quantitative approach is also known as the deductive approach. It is also known as the positivistic approach. It is also known as the mainstream approach. In other words, Pradhana Gangava. The qualitative approach is also known as the inductive approach, the post-positivistic approach. In other words, it's also known as the alternative approach. So when you carry out a research study in the quantitative approach and in the qualitative approach, there is a particular process that you follow, and there is a difference in that particular process. And I would be discussing about that process with you. You have already discussed this during your lectures, but it is just to help you to recall what you have studied, because this is a revision session that we are conducting. Conducting a research study in accounting, you have started to develop your research proposals, and a research study in accounting can be carried out based on the quantitative approach or the qualitative approach, and therefore a research study in accounting, and specifically based on the qualitative approach, the case study research in accounting will be discussed in the sense not in detail, but just to recap what you have been discussing during your lectures. Case studies can be carried out for various purposes. For teaching, there are case studies developed. For research, there are case studies developed. here the focus is on research-based case study and research-based case study in the discipline relevant to accounting. You have commenced a journey to study about research methodology and conducting a research study based on these methodological approaches to research. There was a focus group discussion organized by the Department of Accounting before a syllabus revision. And a passed out graduate who is holding a high position in a business organization said, research methodology is very useful for us because we are able to present the story behind the numbers, because we have the knowledge claims relevant to research methodology. So therefore, the journey that you have started will be helpful to you when you carry out work in your business organizations and when you climb the organizational hierarchy, and also when you accumulate credentials in the future, because for your master's, that is for your postgraduate studies, carrying out a research study will be vital. Therefore, these knowledge claims that you have gathered through this research methodology course unit is of immense value, and you may understand it now or you may understand about it in future. What do you consider as research? Now, you have been studying about research. You're preparing research proposals relevant to a research study. Now, is this a research? Case 1. The management of your company is preparing for labor negotiations. The Director Human Resources asks you to provide some estimates of living costs in Colombo, where the company has its headquarters and major plant. Other plants are located in Anuradhapura, Jaffna, and Mathura, and he would like similar data for these cities too. You consult personnel at the Central Bank of Sri Lanka and obtain statistics published periodically. You find some relevant newspaper articles too. You compile all this, prepare a report, and submit the report to the Director Human Resources. Now, is this case that I have presented, do you consider this as a research? Another example, case 2. You work in the finance department of a company and have been asked to investigate 6 companies which are potential acquisition candidates. You are to gather pertinent data and make a comparative study of the merger attractiveness of the 6. You confine yourself to published sources. You gather copies of company annual reports of a number of years, analyze what financial analysts have said about them, and read everything you can find about each company. After an extensive analysis, you submit a report which emphasizes the potential problems and opportunities that an acquisition of each company would present. Now, is this case 2 that I presented to you a research? Another example, case 3. A paint manufacturing company is having trouble keeping profits up. The operations manager feels that inventory management is one of the weak areas of the company's operations. In this industry, the range of colors, types of paint, and size of containers make it possible for a company to accumulate large inventories, however, yet be unable to fill customer orders. You're asked to make recommendations. You look into the present warehousing, carry out an informal survey among customers. You conclude that the present inventory reporting system does not provide the prompt, usable information needed for appropriate production decisions. Thereafter, you consider several designs for information reporting systems on inventory and carry out a simulation model of the inventory process. From this simulation, you choose the best possible model and suggest it to the operations manager. Now, is this a research? Just one more example, case 4. The Sri Lanka Telecom desires to increase the use of its long distance service by household consumers. The Sri Lanka Telecom has provided reduced rates during off-peak hours to stimulate traffic, but still the growth has not absorbed the available capacity. The Sri Lanka Telecom has employed a consultant to study why people make long distance calls. The consultant conducts 400 interviews and based on this data writes a report of his findings based on a theoretical model developed for the study. I presented to you 4 cases, 4 examples. Now, are these 4 examples, do you consider them as research studies? The entire process by which we attempt to solve problems is called research. Hence, a research involves a solution to a problem. In the process of finding a solution to the problem, what reality is will be discovered. Reality in Sinhalese you called yatarthaya. Yatarthaya වටහා ගන්න පිණිස තමයි the problems that I spoke to you about. They had to resolve those problems and they had to understand that reality. And therefore, they had to carry out research studies. So therefore, all 4 cases are research studies. Reality discovered could be also known as new knowledge. Therefore, through research, you provide a solution to a problem, discovering the reality. In Sinhalese, you call it the yatarthaya and contribute to the body of knowledge. Therefore, through research, you contribute to the body of knowledge. The research study starts with a problem, and then you discover the reality and contribute to the body of knowledge. Now, I said in future you will understand why it was so important that you studied research methodology. But now I can highlight some points. As a manager, why study about research? As a manager, the multi-causality of variables will be known. Therefore, research is important. As a manager, intelligent, educated, calculated, risk can be taken. Therefore, research is important. As a manager, the biases that could creep in will be known. Therefore, research is important. As a manager, the relevant data could be shared with the hired consultant. Therefore, understanding what research is important. As a manager, the output of the hired consultant could be evaluated. Therefore, understanding about what research is important. Therefore, research, understanding research, what research is, how to carry out a research, all these things are important for you. You may not be academics, but even as managers, studying about research methodology is of immense use. Methodological approaches to research. I said that there are 2 methodological approaches to research. the quantitative approach to research and the qualitative approach to research. As I told you, again, I will say quantitative, you call it the positivistic approach, the mainstream approach, Pradhana Grangava, the deductive approach. These are the synonyms. Then the qualitative approach, you call it the post-positivistic approach, you call it the alternative approach, you call it the inductive approach. These are the synonyms. So the methodological approaches to research, it is mainly the quantitative approach and the qualitative approach. When you do the research studies based on the quantitative approach, which is the deductive approach, and the qualitative approach, which is the inductive approach, the research process that you follow, there are differences. You have studied about these differences, but just to recap, when you do a quantitative research study, you start with your research problem and review your literature and tease out your research questions, and you develop a conceptual framework and you collect data, analyze the data, and you have your findings and conclusions from the research study. However, based on the qualitative approach, the inductive approach to research, you start with your research problem and there will be questions teased out from your literature. But what will you do next? You will collect data. In that data collection process, you can go to the field with an open mind. In that process, you call it a grounded theory approach you are going to follow, because you collect data and then you try to find out, oh, I collected data, what is the relevant theory? And then you try to find a relevant theory. However, there is another approach that is possible where before you go into the field, preparatory review of theories. That is, you read some possible theories that could be used that may be relevant for the research study. And then you go to the field and then you collect data and then you select the actual theory that is relevant for the data collected and you develop your theoretical framework. You analyze your data using a data analysis method, and the concepts in the theoretical framework will help you to narrate the empirical story, and then the findings and conclusions of the research study will be presented. So these are the two methodological approaches to research, and how you carry out a research study, the research process, there is a distinction. And here diagrammatically, I have shown you the distinction, and I will just recap these distinctions. In the quantitative approach, the study commences with a theory and thereafter data is collected. However, in the qualitative approach, first the data is collected and thereafter an appropriate theory is found. In the quantitative approach, quantitative data is collected. That is, it is quite numerical. However, in qualitative approach, narrative data is collected. In the quantitative approach, mainly the questionnaire method is used to collect data. However, in the qualitative approach, methods such as interviews, observations, and focus group discussions are used to collect data. In the quantitative approach, context-specific characteristics are not given importance. However, in the qualitative approach, the current context, in the given context, it is studied. Therefore, the case study method is often used. The context needs to be unique for the research study to be significant. In this particular context, what happened? That is what is studied in qualitative research studies. You cannot go in for a generalization because the context will be different. Therefore, in quantitative research, there will be statistical data analysis techniques used. In the qualitative approach, qualitative data analysis techniques such as thematic analysis is used. In the quantitative approach, reality is considered to be within the object. Hence, there is objectivity. Oh, there is a particular object there, outside there. The reality is within that particular object. That is how the researcher thinks. But in qualitative approach, the reality is considered to be a social construction. There it is, the reality is there in the human minds, and hence there is subjectivity. Therefore, there is objectivity, subjectivity, distinctions between the quantitative approach and the qualitative approaches to research. In the quantitative approach, it is considered that data can be collected without researcher intervention because there is a reality out there within the object which could be understood in an independent manner without researcher intervention. However, in the qualitative approach, it is considered that, oh, the reality is within the subject, within the individual's minds. Therefore, researcher intervention is necessary to interpret the data that is being collected. The Greek philosophers argued that there are two views about reality. Reality exists within objects, phenomena studied, or reality exists within the minds of the subjects, individuals. That is also known. What is reality? That is, the technical term used there is ontology. Epistemology is understanding that reality. When collecting data, can the researcher be independent, or has the researcher got to intervene? If the researcher is independent when collecting data, there is objectivity. That is what is to be done in quantitative research studies. If the researcher has to intervene to interpret the data, there is subjectivity. That is what is done in qualitative research studies. Methodology. Research methodology constitutes, that is, I spoke to you about the two methodological approaches to research, quantitative approach and the qualitative approach. In each methodological approach, there would be methods inherent for data collection and methods inherent for data analysis. Methods of data collection and data analysis will depend upon the ontological and epistemological assumptions of the researcher. In some, based on the ontological and epistemological assumptions of the researchers, there are two approaches. Again, I tell you, mainstream, positivistic, deductive, quantitative, all these are synonyms. Or alternative, post-positivistic, inductive, qualitative, all these are synonyms. Quantitative, deductive, and qualitative versus quantitative approach and the qualitative approach. In the quantitative approach, causal factors relevant to a problem are tested, raising the question, what? The questions raised starts with the word what. What factors contributed towards? That is how you start it. However, in qualitative approach, you say how and why questions relevant to the problem are raised. How and why SEMA was able to secure its largest market in Sri Lanka. How and why? That is how you raise the question. The problem is raised. When the problem is raised, in the quantitative approach, you start with what factors contributed. Then the qualitative approach, how and why. That is how you raise the question. Those two words are important. Research study in accounting. Before coming into this research study in accounting that I'm going to discuss, I will give you a background to the research study, because then it will be easy for you to understand the research study. Robert Kaplan in the 1980s, an eminent researcher, he questions the knowledge claims of the management accounting profession. You know, he spoke about relevance loss, the rise and fall of management accounting. Why did he say so? Now, there were traditional management accounting techniques: absorption costing, budgeting, standard costing and variance analysis, CVP analysis, reorder levels and economic order quantity, performance evaluation on financial measures. So there were so many traditional management accounting techniques. He said the relevance is lost. These management accounting techniques came into being from the Western world, and they were pushing towards mass production. Produce more, produce more, produce more. But the Japanese were customer oriented, and they were focusing on small batches, focusing on the customer specific requirements. And therefore, these traditional management accounting techniques which came into being in the Western world were not appropriate for the developments that were taking place in the Japanese production systems. That is why Robert Kaplan spoke about relevance loss, rise and fall of management accounting. He said all management accounting techniques came into being in the 1920s, and thereafter there were no developments to the techniques used. And that is why he and his colleagues started to develop new techniques. Actually, they were able to do it as a business. They actually wrote textbooks and they organized conferences and so on and so forth. And actually, this was all actors and networks got together and tried to disseminate these new techniques to various territories, to various companies, and give the knowledge to the individuals. And actually, the critical researchers say that, actually speaking, this was not new, these were not the new developments as such, but it was just attractiveness to that it was a business like. Actually, I'm not going into that detail. What I'm trying to say is, so Robert Kaplan and his colleagues started to develop new techniques like the balance scorecard and the activity-based costing. And these techniques travel across the globe through various actors and networks to business organizations. So, for example, the professional accounting bodies like CIMA, which is a global body, through its syllabi, disseminates this knowledge and is tested for their exams. And then professionals in countries like Sri Lanka, they get these knowledge claims and they try to implement it in their organization. So these techniques were traveling to countries, to less developed countries like Sri Lanka, in business organizations like Sri Lanka as well. Now, a research study was carried out on the sophistication of management accounting practices in Sri Lanka based on the contingency theory. Now I'm using a theory called contingency theory. For accounting theory, you would have discussed various theories. Now, contingency theory would have been a particular theory that you would have studied. If I ask Chaturika, she will say that this is a theory that you would have discussed during your advanced accounting theory course. Now, there are theories inherent to the quantitative approach to research and the qualitative approach to research. Contingency theory is a theory that is used in the quantitative approach to research because the theories that come from the qualitative approach to research, which is relevant, which is inherent to the qualitative approach to research, those theories come from sociology, psychology, anthropology, where they study about human behavior because the social aspect is given due consideration. But here, the social aspect is not given due consideration because the study is carried out in an independent way where they consider that the reality is out there within the object. Oh, there are research studies where they say there are management accounting practices out there. Oh, those could be implemented. We read from textbooks. We can read from the textbooks and come and implement it in our organizations very easily. The conventional wisdom, that is what you call from what you read from the textbooks. So therefore, based on the contingency theory, Fonseca 2013 carried out a research study based on the quantitative approach to understand what factors contribute towards the sophistication. Another word for sophistication is complexity of management accounting practices in the business organizations operating in Sri Lanka. This was the research problem. Research questions addressed were, what are the, now you see what I said, you start your quantitative approach, problems and questions with the word what. What factors contributed towards the sophistication of management accounting practices in the business organizations operating in Sri Lanka? That was the problem. Then the questions teased out from the literature were, what are the environmental and company-specific contingencies that determine the level of sophistication, in other words, complexity of management accounting practices? Now, then there will be, you know how to carry out a quantitative study, the research process I discussed. So therefore, you tease out your research questions. The research problem is there, the research questions are there, and then you develop your conceptual framework where there will be the independent variables and the dependent variables in your conceptual framework, and thereafter only that you collect data, and you try to collect that data using methods like questionnaires, and then you analyze that data quantitatively using a package like SPSS, and then you do the analysis and you come out with your findings. So therefore, here also you see there is the problem, there are the questions, and then the conceptual framework is developed. The independent variables were that have an impact on the dependent variable, which is the sophistication of management accounting practices, were considered to be perceived environmental uncertainty, decentralization, complexity of processing system, competitive strategy, and size. These relationships were established by reviewing prior research studies. So here you see the problem is there, the questions are there, and the conceptual framework has been developed where you have the independent variables, perceived environmental uncertainty, decentralization, complexity of processing system, competitive strategy, and size. From these factors, what factors would have an impact on the sophistication of management accounting practices, the system, which is the dependent variable? And then the method of data collection, I said the next in the process, the next step is to collect data. 84 listed manufacturing companies from 5 sectors, data has been collected through postal questionnaires, and 47 valid responses have been received, where 56% of response rate has been there in the field survey. And then next step is data analysis and findings. SPSS used to analyze the data, correlation, multiple regression results. Now you saw that there was a list of independent variables and dependent variables. So what was the sophistication depends upon only decentralization, and that is also significant at 5% only. Other variables were not significant. Actually, because I know Fonseca personally and I helped him with his study, when I discussed with him about his study, he was in a dilemma as to what to do about his findings. Then what he did, what is the research approach that should have been adopted to conduct the study? Then what did he do? How and why there is sophistication in the management accounting practice? Now, first, based on the quantitative approach, what he tried to do was that he saw whether the factors, what factors contributed towards the sophistication of the management accounting practice. Now he's trying to understand how and why this sophistication is created. Then you see the words are how and why. These two words are the words that are used to formulate your research problem and research questions. Then the method of data collection. So first you have to collect data, and then only that you will decide on a theory and analyze it. In-depth interviews, factory visits, documentary reviews in 10 companies, because from his quantitative study, he had found that 5 of low management accounting system sophistication and 5 high management accounting system sophistication. So therefore, he collected data from these 10 companies, and the interviews were semi-structured and were conducted until the point of saturation, until new insights are not obtained. And there was data triangulation between the primary and secondary sources of data, and data collected through interviews were tape recorded, transcribed, sent for approval, and revised. And now the data collected needs to be analyzed. As I told you, when the data is analyzed, a theory is necessary. Then from the theory, the institutional theory was used. That is another theory that you would have studied for your accounting theory. Based on the institutional theory, he formulated, he developed a theoretical framework where the key concepts were coercive forces, mimetic forces, normative forces. Coercive forces are regulatory influence. That is, through pressure, you implement. Mimetic forces, imitating another. Copy කරනවා කියන්නේ mimetic. Normative forces associated with professionalization. Oh, as I told you, SIMA, from its syllabus, they give the knowledge. All the professionals are highly taken up with these practices, and they try to come and implement it within their organizations. Though sometimes it is a success story, sometimes it is a failure. So these were the 3 concepts in the theoretical framework developed for the study. It was possible for Fonseca to narrate the empirical story based on the key concepts in the theoretical framework developed for the study based on the qualitative approach to research. So what happens is that from the data collected, themes emerge. One method of data analysis, you have studied about data analysis, thematic analysis, is one method of data analysis. So themes will emerge. And then these themes, based on these themes, the themes are connected to the key concepts in the theoretical framework of the study. That is the plot for the story, the theoretical framework for the study. It can be presented in diagrammatic form. So the key concepts and the theoretical framework for the study will help you to narrate the empirical story. Empirical, in the sense, another word for empirics is data. Question: can it be concluded that the inductive approach to research, that is what do you say? I told you there are two approaches, the quantitative approach and the qualitative approach. Now, Fonseca did the quantitative study first, and then he did the qualitative study, and then he found out how the sophistication comes about within a business organization. There, I told you, the theory he used was the institutional theory. So the qualitative approach to research, is it superior to the quantitative approach to research? Do you agree or not? Discuss. Do you agree or not? Discuss. Methodological approaches to research study has its own strengths and weaknesses. Therefore, without being biased and getting into camps, first consider the research problem to be addressed and thereafter decide on the methodological approach to the research study. So therefore, don't be biased. Don't get into camps. Oh, this is more superior. Oh, why should we listen to those people? Don't think like that. First, think about the problem. Oh, how can this problem be resolved? How can this reality be understood? Then you can decide on your methodological approach. And based on that methodological approach, there is a research process on which you should conduct the study, and you should do so. Now, what I want to tell you is I have 14 undergraduate research students from the 4th year batch to supervise. Based on that, when I supervise them, I have seen some mistakes that they make. I want to highlight a few mistakes that they have been making. They have to review the literature central to the study. Research studies can be obtained from research databases like Emerald, Science Direct, Google Scholar. Keywords relevant to the study could be used when searching for prior studies. And in any research study, there will be an abstract. In that abstract, there will be a title. Can you see the title? Normally the title is written, the first letter is capital and all the other letters are simple. And if it is a country name like Sri Lanka, SNL will be capital. So such details are relevant to be followed when doing academic writing. And in the abstract, this is the abstract, the format that is normally used in papers which are published in the Emerald database. The purpose of the study, the methodology and the methodological approach and the methods of data collection and analysis, findings of the study, practical implications and originality. Actually, the practical implications and originality, that is how it contributed to the literature, is the significance of the study. Now, these things should be incorporated in the abstract, and there will be keywords. And these keywords could be used to type to find out research studies from your research databases to be used for your literature review, which is done in section 2. And through the literature review, then section 1 has to be written where you write the background of the study, and especially actually there will be the research problem, you start with the problem, then you review the literature and you tease out the research questions, and there will be objectives. What I want to tell you is, if you attain the research objectives, you can address your research questions, and addressing your research questions would address your research problem. That is how it works. This also many students cannot understand. And as I told you, a research study based case study, if you're doing a case study for a research, Yin speaks about case study research, where the phenomenon is studied in the given context. It is said that there is no text without context. You cannot understand the text given relevant to a case study, that is the phenomenon, what is your study, within the boundaries and all these things, and what is happening in the real life context. You have to tell. Now, for example, if you are speaking about COVID-19 and how the businesses had to respond to COVID-19, and how the knowledge claims of professional accountants gained relevance when the business responded to these to the changes that were taking place when responding to the crisis. If you are doing a research study like that, and then you can select a particular business organization that will be your case organization, and you have to give the context specific characteristics about that case organization. Otherwise, you can't understand what is happening in that case organization. Therefore, context plays a vital role in case studies, and there is no text without context. However, this is only a particular, just one organization. That is why we cannot go into an empirical generalization where, based on data, what we do in a quantitative studies, that, oh, there is a population, oh, we have to select a sample where all the characteristics relevant to the population will be represented, and then you will carry out a research study in an independent way. That is how you do the research study relevant to the quantitative approach. However, in a qualitative approach, you will do a case study. But in quantitative approach also, before you go into from the population to a big population, you can do an exploratory case study where one particular case study is done, but that is done based on the positivistic approach, the quantitative approach to research. The qualitative approach to research, the research studies are the descriptive and the explanatory approaches. Descriptive means there is no theory. However, the theory provides the plot for the story. In an explanatory case study, you provide the story, you narrate the empirical story based on a theory, based on the key concepts that you have drawn from your theory. And then you see that the context-specific characteristics play a vital role in a case study. But you have to provide only the relevant contextual information. Otherwise, the reader will go astray. But you have to provide that, because there is no text without context. The limitation of a case study method is that it enables only theoretical generalizations, but no empirical generalizations. Because now all my 14 students are doing a case study relevant to organization which had to respond to the COVID-19 situation, and how the knowledge claims of the professional accountants gain relevance. There they can use the same theory, but the case organization is different. That is what they should highlight. That is the context in which that particular organization has been operating in. That should be highlighted. That is what makes their case study unique. But the theoretical generalization is there. Any such story can be narrated using this theory, but the findings cannot be generalized. There are empirical generalization. Based on data, you can generalize only in quantitative research studies. If you have any questions, you can ask now. And I'm going to stop the recording and you can ask questions because you will feel uncomfortable to ask questions if I record. And I don't know what Miss Chaturika, Anil sir and Daya sir would say. It's up to them to decide. Actually, because of the technological constraints, we can record only for 1 hour. So we are close to 1 hour now. I can stop recording and then again start recording all together the question and answer sessions that we will, the question and answer session. Can you please give your views about this, please?
They can ask any question if they want. Sanjeevani, miss?
I will stop this recording and start a new recording for the question and answer session because it is 1 hour that Samita sir says that we can upload.
Okay.
So therefore, I will stop the recording and start a new recording for the question and answer session.
Yeah,